Chapter 15. The Matriarch. As I approached the ocean of figures, it parted like the sea, creating a direct path devoid of any obstacle until there was only one creature left amongst the bevy of beasts. Gamma and I stood, face to face, her hand offering something I hesitated to accept. Around me the citizens watched with bated breath as I gingerly extended my palm. The earth stood still as the creatures gazed up at it like children gaze upon stars, awestruck and brimming with delight as Gamma looked on with her serene, stoic grace. She then tugged me forward and submerged me under her arm, forcibly smothering my chest as she held me to hers. "There isn't much time," she whispered, as she then lifted and carried me, kicking and screaming. Flush with a frenzy, she sprinted forward, spearing straight through the door of a dingy, run-down longhouse, accompanied by the swarm of creations that followed from behind. Suddenly, I was thrown into a direct-riddled floor, home to a building overflowing with creatures. An avalanche of faces lit blazingly, with the aid of conflagration fuming from a pit in the center of the swarm. Around me were children perched high on the tops of bunk beds. Dozens upon dozens of the young, blotched creatures stared at me and gawked. Below them was a group of sallow, frail beasts, their eyes bloodshot and dreary, their faces coated in sweat, all of which blurred together in a cloud of gaunt, fading creatures, each of which appeared to be on the doorstep of death. "Welcome, Walter," shouted Gamma, her voice booming over the song of enthusiasm and intrigue that was consuming the hive, a song that dissipated as the woman continued to speak. "I'm sorry for the rush, but my son can appear at any minute. I fear him seeing us would cause a panic. I'm not welcome here anymore, for reasons I'd prefer not to get into. But first, Walter, I'd like to introduce myself," she said. Her words were articulate, unlike the creatures around her, a clear dictation not even Darwin or Zeta shared, a near human before my eyes. Her time with the doctor was evident. His vision for a hyper-evolved being was alive and well, a mere foot away from me. "I know who you are. You're Gamma, the surviving child of the experiments, the matriarch of the entire city," I exclaimed. The crowd buzzed as the women's laughs echoed in the massive hall. "Correct. You must have met my father, the doctor." I nodded as she paced across the dirt floor, towards the group of ailing subjects who huddled on the far side of the building. "He's charming, isn't he?" she asked, her words traveling along the entire room as she calmly lifted an infant from a sickly mother's hands and cradled it. Her demeanor and gravitas were peculiar. It captivated the entire crowd as their eyes glued to her words. "I suppose," I responded, curious what she was getting at. "He hides it well," she murmured, before turning back towards me, smoothly strolling back to my side of the hall, a child in hand as she continued her speech. "You're not the first, you know. He has asked one before, a man like yourself," she exclaimed. "Gregory Enola was the first visitor of our lands. He too marveled the jungle and fought the inventions of our Creator. He too found us, and he too passed the doctor's tests," she proclaimed. Again, I was confronted by an eruption of possible deception, left to wield my only remaining tool, my gut, something that has an awful track record and was a tag preoccupied by its plight of malnutrition. "You've met Gregory," I repeated. The words felt odd as they left my mouth, as I was disappointed in myself for taking the bait. "The doctor interviewed him for a position, to take his post as an observer before he dies. He thought I could help persuade the stranger, make him interested in finishing my father's legacy. to see it through until Zeta's children are full grown and—" She paused as she stared into the infant's scarlet eyes. "Perfect," she finished, her voice mildly cracking. "Obedient soldiers. That's what he wants from us, to bend to his will." Gregory declined the position, saying he wouldn't violate God's work, the true God, not the one my father pretends to be. Naturally, Dr. Oscar was furious, offended by the man's insolence. He couldn't understand how someone could refuse such an offer, how anyone would say no to the chance of glory, exclaimed Gamma. To her credit, her story matched what the doctor was hinting at. Gregory's unadulterated loyalty to his Bible was clear. Him being disinterested in the doctor's ploy hardly seemed far-fetched. It sounded like it could be true. It sounded like Gregory. Perhaps my gut wasn't leading me astray after all. "What did the doctor do to him?" I asked. The doctor was slipping into madness by the time Gregory arrived. His disappointment from the refusal was clear. I suspected he would let Zeta deal with the human, free his favorite toy and let it release its pent-up rage. My son never got the chance, as Gregory offered an alternative. He offered you, Walter. He'd be your personal guide and confidant, make you feel safe, and allow you the chance to organically experience the island. Then, and only then, would he bring you to the doctor, when he thought you were ready. They clearly picked the wrong person. I have no interest in being here. I'm not qualified to lead anything, or anyone. I can hardly lead myself, I commented, as Gamma now stood proudly in front of me, her face leaning close, nodding along with the end of every sentence I spoke. "We're lucky they made such a grave and unfortunate error. With you here, Walter, we have been given an opportunity, a chance to erase the doctor's contorted web of a plan and create a new one, a better one." She then leaned down toward the floor and handed me the child, who couldn't have been more than a few days old, its face coated in a creamy white skin, soft to the touch as he swooned in my hands. Like the soldiers that walked the streets, covered in blackened marks, one even circling around his closed eye, mirroring the image of a Dalmatian. Around Gamma, the once passive crowd was growing increasingly eager, as if they were sitting in the front row of a circus, and the trapeze was about to snap. "In 2 days' time, this boy will be paralyzed. One of our many children who has been selected by the doctor to receive one of his blessings. Paralysis has been his favorite gift lately, thinking he could snap them from their trance, thinking that because this boy was born prematurely, that he deserves to be butchered." The crowd around her fell mute in the weight of her words, mothers coddling their children especially tight as Gamma spun the tale of their tragedy. "Yes, my father is incredibly charming, a devil who dons the skin of an angel. It's his best trick. Tell me this, Walter. What would you like from the island, from its bounty of extraordinary land dwellers and mammals?" she asked. "I want to leave it. Somehow, some way. I want to escape," I replied. It was the truth. The doctor's hooks did not claw deep. I had little interest in leading his people and abandoning my life. Continuing the doctor's work and mangling my people for the sake of research doesn't intrigue you?" she asked. Every eye and face fell upon me while I glared up, perplexed. "Of course not," I responded. "Then you will escape," she shouted, catalyzing a cascade of cheers. I found it comical how easy the horde was swayed. as if just saying the words would teleport me back safely into my apartment. But little did they know just how impossible a task that was. I knew for certain the giant was going to simply catapult me into the nearest airport. I doubted the doctor would reveal an exit route from his vault of answers without spouting senseless innuendos, and I, without a shadow of a doubt, would not take one step off the island without Gregory by my side. Regardless of the lies and the deception each science experiment revealed about my friend. Yeah, I've been trying to do that since the moment I got here. I traveled all around this island searching, and guess what? It can't be done. I can't swim 1,000 miles. I can't build or steer a boat, and I certainly can't find any help from the people who live here. So if you excuse me, I have to find my friend, I vowed, careful not to awaken the baby out cold in my arms. My decision faltered into a harebrained endeavor as the mob shouted deafening nonsense at me. Likely profanities, but to be honest, I couldn't care less. I even chuckled as the infant in my hands was still fast asleep. "Silence!" Gamma shouted, calming the nerves of the frantic beings in the crowd. It was the first moment where I was reminded of her colossal of a son. Evidently, thunderous voices are genetic. "Before you refuse our help, first listen to our offer. Please, at least give us that," she continued, her passion galvanizing the crowd. Before I could offer an answer, I had to consider the consequences of engaging in a pact with a stranger. Time was paramount and rattling in my head as I knew every moment in the hall was a moment lost in finding Gregory and freeing Darwin. Compelled by her intensity and the fear of being mauled to death by her followers, I did the only sensible thing I could. I listened. Crawling deep inside our Creator's towers are wires. They're tangled beneath the fabric and are attached to a generator the doctor has conveniently hidden from his people, myself included. They're in place because of the doctor's need for communication. Below his desk lies a radio transmitter, one he never uses outside of routine checkups and supply runs. On the other end of the signal is a human, someone who can listen to you. Sometimes it's even a group of humans. They speak to the doctor and help him whenever he needs it. That includes emergency evacuations should the occasion arise. Luckily for him, it never has. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. "I'm suggesting you call for help. Make up a lie or story. Make them come to the island on their boats and planes, and make them trust you. And then you can escape. You can go back home to the mainland and free yourself of our world's claws." For a moment I paused, considering the idea with heavy interest. "It's awfully nice of you to map out a plan for me. I reckon there's a reason for your assistance," I replied. A subtle smirk emerged on her lips. "I want you to take me with you." The crowd gasped at the creature, who fell to her knees. "I need to tell your world what's being done here. To my children and grandchildren, poisoned and infected without an ounce of empathy. Our minds have been defiled from the doctor's tricks. He's playing with lives to feed an old man's ego. I won't allow it anymore, Walt. I will not." I'm not sure she understood the magnitude of her words. A creature like her walking into my country? It would be anarchy. A discovery that would shatter the glass ceiling of trust many still hold within our nation's secrets. "I can't take you," I replied. My words were delicate and calm, a complete antithesis of the crowd that moaned in anguish. "You can't or you won't," spouted Gamma, not unable to contain her frustration. "I genuinely can't. You're asking me to sneak you into a boat and venture with you into reality. I don't think you can comprehend how difficult that would be. These people, on the other end of the signal, they're likely in bed with the doctor. If they find you, they're going to turn the boat around and return you to your master. As a reward for my service, they'll shoot me in the fucking head. You could convince them, Walter. Tell them our story and change their ways. If that doesn't work, you can fight them off. Look, I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I know you can think of something, she exclaimed. You think very highly of me, I replied. She put her hand on my head and grazed her fingers through my long, shaggy hair. As should you, she stated. If only it was that simple. I slumped to the floor, my mind racing with possibilities. By agreeing to this, I was essentially sealing my fate, potentially even Darwin's and Gregory's as well, losing the slivers of trust the doctor and Zeta held in me, creating two enemies in an effort to gain one ally. While I'm not the brightest man in the world, I know how to do basic math. I know a bad deal when I see one. I shamefully shook my head no, as the clan of creatures looked on and offered the infant back to Gamma. People keep asking me to help them. For the life of me, I don't know why. I can't possibly give you something I can't give myself. There's no saving anyone here. There's no way to fix your twisted minds, and there's certainly no way for me to get back what you've all lost. I've tried, doing all of these for years. Years of my life wasted sprinting down dead ends. So please, learn from my mistakes and stop running. Stop trying to fix everything and stop using me to do it, I exclaimed. My words were wavering but firm. Gamma did not accept the child. Instead, she moved even closer. From the crowd emerged Theta, her two silver-haired children by her sides, as she collapsed to the ground next to me, practically inches from my face, which was now glowing green from the woman's eyes. Look at the creation in your hands. Understand its future. On one path you will grow up to be a motherless beast, a victim of the doctor's infection trials. Once he's healed, he will be forced to turn to his father, who will mold him into a machine, a mindless brute without a cognition or thought of free will. Understand your ability to change that, to save his future, to save his mother, to save all of us, Walter, she whimpered. Walter, if you take me with you, we can change this world, make it better, make it pure, said Gamma. As I looked back up at Gamma and Theta, my heart broke. Flashes of my mother's face were etched on the figures before me. The same distraught hopelessness, asking me to do something impossible to fix their fragile lives. I knew I would refuse, carrying away from the threat of failure, avoiding any internal conflict for the sake of self-preservation. I knew this to be true. A vital cog in the machine that protected me, and yet 3 ludicrous words fell from my mouth. 3 words that compromised the infallible formula that has kept me sane for over a decade of my life. I'll do it, I whispered, as my stomach plummeted deep into my soul. I agreed to my final chapter. I agreed to my death sentence, and it came with a rousing applause. "Our savior is born!" chanted Gamma, lifting me to my feet as the crowd of creatures screeched in joy. All right. Everybody calm down. We're not out of the woods yet. We need a concrete plan, something bulletproof that can get us from point A to point B, I exclaimed, attempting to diffuse the crowd's electrifying thrill, embracing the wonderful killjoy bundled up inside of me. We won't have to wait long, Walter. Tonight the city is having a ceremony. Delta is to be executed at nightfall. It's Zeta's idea of justice, slitting his own brother's throat and heaving him into the river, letting his body wither away down the barrels of the waterfall. A barbaric fate for an incredible person. You've met my son. You understand just how special he is. selfless and kind, unlike any creature I've ever met." "So we have to stop the ceremony and save Delta," I interjected, stirring in the possibility of my two goals crossing paths. "No, Delta has to die," she stated, cold as ice. "A sacrifice that has to be made. If he's not put to death, our opportunity will vanish." A mother freely allowing her son to die. If anyone was foolish enough to question the woman's motivation, they can rest assured it was clear she was determined to see our escape through, regardless of the consequences. A few of the members of the assembly wilted like dead flowers, melancholy and dejected from the inevitable death of her brother. The doctor has taken a liking to Delta over the years, raising him as an infant, watching him grow into the most unique of all his children, a conduit of hope, a fearless leader whose altruistic quality is rare amongst our species, uncommon even for humans. The doctor will not rot away in his holy tower all night. He will be in attendance, watching up close the death of his one and only stroke of perfection, his life's work being thrown away by his greatest mistake, while he's standing and festering in his turmoil. That's when you will climb the tower, search his belongings, and find the transmission. I'd have to be sly, but with the right timing and with the cloak of night, it was feasible. A feasible plan was better than everything I've done in the past couple weeks, so I was more than happy to oblige, and with my acceptance, the crowd roared my name as they beamed a rare glimmer of happiness, an emotion these creatures scarcely expressed, and one that disappeared as fast as it arrived. Stomps smacked against the floor outside as the walls drummed a dreadful song. "They are here," croaked Zeta, who swam into the crowd with her children, disappearing into its cloak. Through the door came Zeta, simmering in a compressed fury as he stormed to the center of the hall. "Where is the human?" he roared, the flames dancing behind him mimicking his fierce ire. Gamma stood before me, her sisters joining the wall that hid me from the gaze of the monster. "Mother! What a surprise!" bellowed Zeta as he inched closer. "Son," replied Gamma, her words gruff and emotionlessness, "have you lost your memory with age, or have you consciously entered my city without my consent? You are very aware that you're not welcome here anymore," spouted the giant, as he was becoming dangerously close to the mob. "Your city," laughed Gamma. "Don't be a fool, my child. This is the doctor's city, not yours. The human is none of my concern. I've come to visit my firstborn on the day of his ceremony, to bid him farewell before you take his life. Would you deny your mother even that?" she snapped back. "The human is none of your concern. Is that why all you were chanting his name? Were you cheering his insignificance?" he growled. "'Twas a minor blow. I've been called much worse." Zeta then plowed through the wall of creatures and approached. His once ivory flesh was blistering red as he tugged me upwards by the ear. "You're holding my son, my newborn son," he yelled, as the child awakened and rattled the air with its cries. "That's very observant of you," I quipped, as Gargantuan's hand snatched the child from my grasp. He held the child high in the air with his palm, its body slipping from his grasp as he dangled it in front of the crowd. With his other hand, he slashed me across the face, flattening me to the floor. "These are not your people," not yours to play with. You have to earn them. You've earned nothing in this world. You're an imbecile who walked into the right jungle at the right time," he uttered, his words like a megaphone stapled to the cartilage of my eardrums. "Please, Zeta, give it to me," pleaded the sickly mother on the far side of the hall. "Give him to you? Like you gave him to a stranger? No. I'm afraid this boy is no longer yours to give," he said, as he wrapped the infant under his arm, shaking it as its deafening screams raged onward. "Rise, human," commanded Zeta, as he glared at me. I lifted my head and rolled my eyes as blood raced down my lips. "Rise," he repeated, howling at me as I defied his words. In fear of the infant's safety, I complied, shooting to my feet and scowling at the pale warlord. "Dr. Oscar requests your presence. Immediately. Go to him at once, or else I'll bring you there. It's your choice." I clogged my nostril with the palm of my hand and smiled at the monster. "I think I'm fine, right here," I replied. For a moment the beast paused, his hand twitching in a minor tantrum. He then calmed himself and continued. "The doctor is not alone. He has found your friend. Gregory is waiting for you, Walter. Do you want to keep him waiting?" My heart dove in a pound of worry as I feared the worst. How could I have been so daft? Destroying the doctor's trust could lead to the death of my companion, and yet there I stood, refusing Zeta's order and conjuring an escape plan, and I thought my days of warped selfishness were over. "You told me he was dead," I yelled. He shrugged his hulking shoulders. "Resurrection, I suppose. A true miracle. I can turn him back if you'd like. Correct nature's wrongdoing." All right, that's enough. "I'll go," I exclaimed, as I walked solemnly through the crowd, their faces in horror as Zeta eviscerated their shrine of hope. I looked back at Gamma, who was unmoved, still and serene as she nodded a comforting salute. As I exited, I was greeted by a blinding enemy in the sky. A gushing sunset was forming, while the star started its gradual plummet into the sea. Time was evaporating before my eyes, as Darwin's final clock kept ticking. In a frenzy of angst, I rushed up the mountain of stairs that circulated around the tower, blood funneling out from my nose, joining the red paint that decorated the wood floor below. Step by step I frantically tripped. Each one felt like 30. I was completely flustered by the drum of dread beating in my head, a sound that was magnified by the mile-high ascent that was plaguing my legs. A physical pain that, for all intents and purposes, was overshadowed by the internal pain the climb caused. I finally knew where Gregory was, but despite this comfort and the knowledge it brought, knowing how long I've ignored him baked an unwavering fear in my veins, not only ignoring his survival, but also the bounty of questions stapled to my head. I had to ask them, no matter what. I had to hear the lies leave his lips, and I had to pray they weren't true. As I arrived at the top step, my despair culminated as I discovered my friend lying on the floor. His head nudged tightly against the office's door as he slumped on the blood-stained deck. The blood, sadly, was his. I rushed to his aid, unable to lift his cumbersome body off the ground as he crashed back down to the floor. Meek, slender eyes flickered open, releasing a cascade of sea foam blue that was surrounded by a beach of charcoal sand. Gregory had been beaten, his sockets bludgeoned and black, his arms and legs coated with welts and blisters. Around his wrists were crimson imprints that entrenched itself deep into his flesh. The man was painted in a light I'd never seen him before, as if a superhero removed his suit and cape to reveal an old, sickly man. As Gregory came to realize the man sitting in front of him, he blushed a magnificent simper, revealing a chipped and missing teeth that were now stained maroon. "What have they done to you?" I whispered, as he looked on in bliss. "They haven't killed me, thanks to you," he exclaimed, his voice starkly weak. "The soldiers captured me in the city," he said. "I was trying to save you, Walter. The moment I saw Zeta's hand strike you, I rushed into the Colosseum and was swarmed by them. The fists pounded against me until I lost consciousness. They then hid me in a cell, far and away from any of the other prisoners. It was wretched, Walter. They tortured me for sport, blaming me for their brother's death, keeping me awake every hour, slowly maiming me as they laughed. It wasn't until the giant came running over that they stopped. He told them I could be useful, that you needed me, and so he carried me up here, the one place I don't want to be." He paused as a tear was falling down his face. "I was wrong about this place. So very wrong. I risked your life to realize that. I'm so sorry, Walter. I failed you. I couldn't keep you safe, and look what that's caused. Your face, my God, your face," he panted, as his hand cupped against my cheek. My nose was still cracked. My forehead was bulbous thanks to swelling, and the tufts of my hair were knotted in dirt and dried blood. I was gradually turning into the monsters that patrolled the island, becoming part of its whole. "To you right now," I joked. It was a sentence that prolonged my heartbreak. I knew the words he would soon say, and yet I wanted to preserve the friendship we once had, even if it was for a few moments. Gregory's outlandish cackle rang in my ear, a joyous sound that helped ease my stress, something that was melting away as I sat with him. "Gregory, I know how we're going to escape. I have a plan for the both of us. You and I will be on our way home very shortly, so you're going to have to hang in there, okay? Don't get weak on me now. If we're going to do this, we must do it together," I pleaded. He soberly shook his head. "I'm not going anywhere, Walter. I'd slow you down. I can't risk costing you your life. It's too precious a thing to throw away. You have to leave this place. And tell no one about it. Keep it a secret, or else they'll come for you. All of them. They won't let it spread. What you know, what you've seen, and who you've met, all of it will be your end. They'll make sure of it," he implored, his words wholeheartedly sincere while he suppressed pulses of torment. "Gregory, I can't do that. The entirety of my escape revolves around bringing one of these creations home with me. Gamma, she wants to tell the entire world about this place. With her in the fold, there'd be nothing to deny. Living proof standing by my side. There's not a thing they can do," I said. For a moment, Gregory mulled into deliberation, a stone-blank expression that sprouted into a smirk. "Gamma is special, isn't she? An anomalous beauty hiding in this land of treachery. An oddity not even my God could have created. And she's convincing, too, isn't she? I don't fault you for agreeing to her demands." "You've met her?" I questioned, curious if he would finally give me what I've wanted for weeks. Honesty. And if I'm being honest, I wanted him to tell me they were all lying, that his betrayal wasn't true, even if it wasn't likely. I'd rather be darkened by ignorance. I'd rather be blinded by its bliss. For at that point in my life, I prefer lies to the truth. They tasted much sweeter. She was the first I've ever discovered. Dr. Oscar introduced me to her years ago, displayed her ingenuity. On the day of our meeting, her performance on intelligence, physical, and cognitive tests were off the charts, Walter. I could hardly believe my eyes. Outproducing even the most gifted of humans, and she was doing it without any proper schooling or training, just from genetics and scientific exploration. She was crafted by the doctor to be an advanced, aberrant creature that superseded all who lied before her, and he succeeded, and it terrified me. Perfecting the imperfections of humans? It was unethical and hazardous, something that could lead to the fall of mankind. I couldn't possibly contribute, he conceded. It was as if the stem in my head had snapped. My comprehension depleted into the capacity of a child, sitting there whimpering away in a bubble of disorientation. I don't understand, I croaked, failing to cope with the crumbling fate I prayed wasn't true. Walter, I've been here before. This island, all of it. I lied to you, and I've never been more regretful in my life. Deceiving you every day. It ripped away at my core, my inner core that has grown to care for you. You're like a son, Walter. I never intended to hurt you. A fraud relied on mendacity to interact with me. It wasn't the first time somebody used that tactic to treat me as a son. What Gamma told me about you. How you used me and manipulated me to help the doctor. That's all true, I exclaimed. My intentions were pure, Walter. We read your file. We agreed that you could benefit from an experience like this, an opportunity to change. Benefit from this? Benefit how? Anger was bursting from my spine. Betrayal is a feeling I hadn't felt for a long time. Even as I've aged, it has ceased to remove its keen sting. Walter, the more I learned about you, the more my heart broke. You've been alone for so long, so very long, too afraid to be with another or try anything meaningful, fearing you'd fail. You're lying. You're lying. You're just lying, that's all it is, I repeated, trying to calm myself as a feeling I've tried decades to suppress came rocketing up my throat. Walter, I'm afraid I'm finally telling you the truth. Please, tell me you're lying. Please, just tell me you're lying. Tell me you haven't been toying with me this entire time. I've not been toying with you, Walter. I've been grooming you for something I thought you'd want. The doctor and I thought you'd want to be the chosen one, the man to live a life away from the world, to rule his own. Gregory, I trusted you. I fully trusted you. And you took that trust and you violated it. Do you know how hard it is for me to trust people? Do you know how rare that's ever given? Walter, I'm so very Do you know how many times a day I tell myself not to trust anyone? How often hate runs through my head. Hating the people around me for what they've done, for what they'll do. Hating myself for letting them hurt me. Hating myself for being too afraid to be hurt. Every fucking day, hate fuels me. And these people, these friends, the people who claim they care about me, always tell me I'm wrong. That I should let myself trust. After a while, I believed them. I thought I was the problem. I thought I had to change myself, and it seems even that was wrong. For the second I give myself to another, the second I tear away at all the walls and shields that block who I am, that person takes my heart and defiles it. They throw it away like it's nothing. They confirm what I've always feared and yet always hoped would never happen. You broke my heart, Gregory. You truly did. I thought you were my friend. I thought wrong. So very wrong. I am your friend, Walter Mai. That's why I'm going to fix this terrible mistake I've made. Not a word he said could temper my pain. It soared with every second, its weight splintering into my chest. Yeah, this is gonna hurt. This is gonna hurt a lot more than you know. You have no idea, I admitted. It was becoming clear the damage this was about to inflict. Walter, listen, you need to... I give you every part of me. Every story, every truth, and you took that faith and you used it. You butchered it. I really thought you would be different. Somebody who has lost, who has been hurt. I thought we'd protect each other from that, knowing how much it could hurt. But here you are, no better than the rest of them. It seems I just picked the wrong one. Bad on me, I said, my filter flinging from my mouth as every truth I had left to give spilled from my tongue. Gregory remained unflinching on the floor, revealing a sympathetic nod as he looked up at me. I should have never brought you here. I realize that now. I made a mistake choosing you. Not because of your faults, but because of your strengths. Hide it all you want, but I know a good person when I see one, and that's exactly what you are. Unable to accept the corrupt frailty that forms the foundation of this island. I wasn't any different. I rejected the doctor's offer, and I offered him service because I saw a man who could have been perfect. Unshackled by family, obligations, or his religion, someone with ambition who would have wanted to leave a world he despised to become the leader of a world in which he could thrive. But I misjudged you. You're too bright for this, Walter. You see through a transparency that I was blinded to. I just don't understand the charade. The forced marathon. Why not just fly me in a plane here? It could have saved me so much time and so much pain, I sighed, as my battle with logic was bleeding away. I went through the same gauntlet, Walter. I had that same exact question. The doctor believes it's part of the training, part of the orientation into a role that requires strength, survival, and experience with his work. It's a demonic way to go about business, but at least I was here to guide you. He couldn't risk losing another candidate, and I couldn't risk putting your life up to chance. I knew I could get you here. I just didn't know how wicked this place had become. His plans to massacre the weak and rebuild and reproduce the strong until an army is made? An unstoppable force? No longer does he engage in research. He's now engaging in fantasy. A world in which he is a god amongst men, holding in his hands a weapon the entire world can't defend. Gregory then pulled me closer, his eyes welling as he was bristling with remorse. Walter, he said he could fix my son. My boy. He was the only one I could find. To wake him from his pain, to make him walk again. But it was just another lie. A way to bring you here. Another trick I fell for. I was desperate, and it made me foolish. Walt, question my judgment and morality all you want, but don't for a second question what we've formed. Every moment I've spent with you was genuine. Every war we fought together was authentic. We survived together, you and I. You saved my life, and I owe you everything. Everything I am, I owe to you. You're special, Walter, and I've ruined everything we've gained together. I screwed up. I fucked up, and I'm so very sorry, he sobbed. Now look, I'm not somebody who forgives or forgets. It's part of my stubborn, calcified mold that has led me to become the sheltered, withdrawn child that I am and likely always will be. I did, however, realize two vital facts as I sat there with the shell of the man I once knew. For one, life is not only short, but when you have just become trapped on Satan's desolate and dreary playground, it becomes completely and utterly obsolete. A blink of the eye that can come to a crashing halt with one misstep or mistake. Spending that flash in the pan holding a grudge on a man who clearly cared about me and desperately wanted me to forgive him was a complete and absolute waste of time. Gregory couldn't go back in time and undo the damage he caused. He couldn't know the danger the doctor held. A family drove him to the brink, and I was a stranger. I may have done the same in his shoes, I'll never know. I don't want to ever know. But I did know he was sorry. I could feel it in his words. Well, sorry wasn't nearly enough. It was more than most people ever gave. In that moment, it sufficed. Secondly, I realized that the golden child, choir boy I've come to know and love, just cursed for likely the first time in his life. I couldn't help but burst out laughing as a word that was highly familiar just became tainted by a pure man's lips. Gregory's fragile face seemed hurt by my crass response to his desperate plea until I shook him in excitement. "Did you just say fuck?" I happily stated, as the once broken man before me blushed in embarrassment. "Oh, heavens, I think I did." "Oh, my. You seem to be rubbing off on me, Walt," he cackled. Considering that unfortunate truth, the least I can do is accept your apology. Completely contingent upon your attendance in a heroic escape later tonight. Do we have a deal? I asked as I extended my hand. "We have a deal," he bellowed, as we agreed upon a highly foolish and unlikely endeavor. A business we'd somehow been completing in and flourishing in since the moment we arrived on the island. So remnants of hope existed. More than enough to fuel our crazed and bombastic spirits. Just as we were absorbing the exuberance of our potential escape, a door flung open, popping our bubble of joy. Above us stood the doctor, draped head to toe in black, dreary garb. "Hello, Walter. Nice of you to join me here," he blurted, until a paused, bewildered look was summoned onto his face. "What on earth are you doing down there?" he asked. "Gregory's not doing well, Doctor. I'm worried about him." Both of the doctor's thin, wiry eyebrows rose from his face. "Ah, your friend. What seems to be the problem?" I was left blown away by his absurdity, too wrapped up in his own egocentrism to see a nearly dead man on his doorstep. "He's been beaten by your hounds. He tried to save me, and they did this to him," I exclaimed, distraught in confusion as the doctor smiled at my words and pondered a thought. Wait. Let me think. Oh yes, that can work, he muttered to himself as he rushed to one of the cabinets in his office. He then scuttled back with 2 mustard-colored pills and handed them to me. I glared back up at him suspiciously. "They're painkillers, for God's sakes. I'm not trying to poison the man," he bellowed. After several seconds of meticulous calculation, I gave Gregory the pills. He was in agony, after all. Rolling the dice with the doctor's honesty was a better medicine than anything I had to offer. "Walter, please, come in. We need to chat before you make your decision," said the doctor, as he plopped back down into his chair. "No, I'm not leaving him," I affirmed. "How courageous of you. Rest assured, Mr. Mai, your friend isn't going anywhere. He'll be there well after our little talk, so no need to fear. But first, you have to let the medication sink in. It takes time, but with rest, the results are much more effective. You wouldn't want to deny your friend rest, would you?" I shook my head no as I fought off fits of annoyance at the arrival of yet another rhetorical question. "Of course not, because you're a good friend, aren't you, Walter?" he continued. Again, I nodded. In the end, I gingerly rose from the floor, fitting the man's needs and making sure Gregory was comfortable before entering the office. As I entered, I hastily attempted to defuse the old man's intrigue. "There's really no need for this. I've already decided," I bluntly stated. "Have you? That's interesting. I don't remember having us a chat." "Like I stated before, first we chat, then we decide. No skipping any steps. I have to make sure my stance is clear," he said, signaling with his hand for me to sit. Before his seedy sofa was a decadent tray of food. Skewers of charred and beefy meat, slices of every fruit under the sun, a bounty of vegetables glistening after a fresh wash, and mounds of marshmallows towering in a bowl. It was an odd selection for a meal, but incredibly tantalizing. It was another trick up the doctor's sleeve, but I was more than willing to be tricked, especially considering the giant vial of vodka standing handsomely in the middle. A centerpiece I couldn't wait to plunge down my throat and ease my mind for but a moment. As my plan stood, a little liquid courage could do wonders. "I guess I have a few questions for you. I might as well join," I said, as I languidly plopped down onto the musky seat, plucking and peeling at every scrap in front of me and pouring myself a nice, heaping glass. "Of course you have questions. You're Walter Mai. If it wasn't for those pesky questions of yours, I wouldn't even recognize you. That bush on your face really makes you look like an entirely different person, as if you've aged 30 years. See? Right there. Right in that instance. That's what I'm curious about. You have no idea who I am. You've never seen me before or met me. You keep blabbering on about bullshit, about this island, about who I am and what I want, but you don't really know anything. Just aimless guesses, and for some reason, you think I'm qualified to do what you do as if I considered the possibility. I can't wrap my head around the leaps you take with my story, the assumptions and box you've placed me in. All I know is that I'm here, in this room with you, and for the life of me, I don't know why," I exclaimed, while I funneled the first glass into my veins. It felt like a fire roaring under my skin, but I loved every second of it. The doctor's pleached pearls his mouth as he smiled and leaned forward. "Are you about to ask the question I've been waiting this entire time for you to ask? Why did I pick you, of all people?" he inquired. "Well, I suppose so," I replied. "Well, it's about damn time. Listen, you were by far the best candidate. Let's put to your side your brief studies in zoology, your impressive intelligence scores, and put a spotlight on what made you what you really are, what you offered me. For starters, You're a young, healthy man who is dissatisfied with his life and looking for a change." "I've never said that," I shouted. "As if you'd have to. You make barely more than minimum wage, are an isolate who lives alone, and spend your weeks traveling the country doing a job you hate. And don't you dare deny that fact. You despise your job, only doing it because it's become part of your safe and secure loop, something that could risk your stability if you changed it. If you removed one spoke off your wheel, you'd fear you'd come crashing down. Don't be ashamed of it, Walter. I just described millions of people across the globe. To be completely honest, Walter, what makes me enchanted by you is your deformity, the major flaw you hide from the world. I've looked at your records and have spoken to your therapist. I know what you are, at least what you were." His words were grandiose and presumptive, as if he's been planning this speech for months. "And what's that?" I coldly replied. "You're insane." And with that answer, the doctor he likely always was. Not someone who cared for me or wanted me. He was someone who wanted to take advantage of me. It was like a cord in my brain had been unplugged, removing any hope he and I shared for a potential partnership. A diagnosed schizophrenic who has a history of mental illness and hallucinations. Delusions that have almost had you killed. A highly publicized event in your records that included a little girl who never existed. One that compelled you to jump off a bloody building, for God's sake. He had to stop speaking due to his fits of maniacal laughter, like a stereotypical cheesy movie villain, laughing like a fucking idiot. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to poke fun. Finding happiness and the handicap's utility is by no means my idea of joy. He chuckled to himself until finally finding composure, easing his laughter while he expressed an inauthentically stern face. That was a false diagnosis. My other therapists have proven that already, I stated through gritted teeth. Oh, I couldn't care less. It's on your record and that's all that really matters. The kink in your armor impossible to overlook. It's been many years since I've had an episode. I'm no longer that person. I'm not affected by that sickness anymore. It's gone. In response to the Joker cackled. Gone. Tell that to the piece of paper in your hands. Tell that to the daily medication you take. Would it be ridiculous for me to assume that your little bottle of pills never joined you on your journey? He exclaimed. I didn't want to give the smug dickhead any bit of satisfaction. Oh, you've grown quiet, my friend. How odd. Fine. I'll answer my own question. No, Dr. Oscar, that's not ridiculous. That's completely and utterly accurate. Rife with pleasure, the man was stirring in his own bile. Don't think I don't know what you want, Walter. You want to be respected, loved, and appreciated for the special, flawless person you are. Oh, your desire is unoriginal, and something you'll never achieve if you cling to the distant, isolate person you really are, someone you most definitely plan on keeping. By doing so, you've caught yourself in your own web. The only person who can free you is me, not because I want to change you. Walter, fuck changing. I want to give you respect, love, and appreciation without having to alter one iota of your being. I don't know what was worse. The fact that I didn't stand up from my chair and smack him square in the face, or the fact that what he just described was the God-honest truth. Words I've never articulated before, feelings not even the most skilled of therapists could pry. So you prefer damaged goods? I don't understand that logic, I said. It was my best attempt to divert the doctor's attention from the dart he just threw. the one that smacked against the bullseye of my inner psyche. "Let me ask you a question, Walter. Why did you conjure the little girl in your brain? What in the world would coerce such an odd delusion?" he asked. Answering a question with a question is a repulsive habit of the daft and dim-witted. "Why do you ask?" I replied. Answering a question that followed another question, that's much more acceptable. "Indulge me," he blurted. "I was a child whose father disappeared from thin air. He left my mother and me and never came back. It was a traumatic experience," I admitted. Dr. Oscar was attentively nodding along, similar to the tactic used by my former psychologist to prove just how talented they were at listening. "Now, answer another question for me. How would you describe surviving a plane crash and arriving on an abandoned, soulless island, left by yourself to ward off the plights of starvation and thirst?" he asked. "I call it a catastrophic experience," I quipped. "Oh, catastrophic, you say? Well, in my book, that's just a synonym for traumatic. In summary, for event number 1, you suffer a traumatic experience which leads to hallucinations of a girl who never existed. In event 2, you suffer from a traumatic experience which leads to an island brimming with extraordinary but highly violent man-made monsters. What would most people classify the result of event number 2? The answer he was looking for was hallucinations. Did he deserve an answer? To be fair, he deserved points for creativity, but an answer he did not receive. All I gave him was a frigid, empty stare. "Now you understand why I chose you. Of all the wonderful, highly qualified candidates, you stand above the rest. By far the least dangerous and least connected. Worst case scenario, you say no. Escape and run to the presses, screaming at the top of your lungs our short list of wrongdoings. Our counterpoint? An easy sell, one a toddler could make. What's more likely, scientists creating superhumans under the government's nose, or that a mentally ill man relapse following yet another traumatic experience?" "You're delusional," I exclaimed. "That makes 2 of us," he simpered. Eager to wipe the smug look from his face, I searched for a hole in the man's cleverly constructed ruse. "And how would you stifle Gregory's words? A respected professor? Are you going to chalk him up to insanity as well?" I wondered. A wonder that divulged from a pure curiosity into pure fear, as the doctor released a chuffed smile. "Gregory Enola died due to injuries on the first day after his arrival. Critical hemorrhaging took his life as he passed away at the edge of a pool of water, one that sat at the base of a waterfall. At that same pool, a young man who is a schizophrenic, don't forget that, discovered his dead body, and as a way to cope with the harrowing stress the island brought, reanimated the dead carcass as a friend, an ally that acted as a coping mechanism who kept the man alive throughout his entire stay. A fictitious friend who never existed." Just like that, I was 12 years old again, a child stuck in a cemented igloo of his own delusion, one that would never melt or fade away, a tomb that will forever keep me frozen in barrels of my disease. I do my best to hide it, I really do. To devalue a diagnosis, to devalue an abandonment, people I've told myself to forget. But by now, you've likely to come to realize that I'm still that 12-year-old kid. A scared child parading around in an adult's costume, performing a growingly arduous magic trick. I try to make that part of me disappear in an effort to give another part of me a spotlight. The problem is those 2 halves of my whole are not mutually exclusive. They are both parts of a war that will cease to end. One spawned the other, a creation designed to destroy its creator. Is that true? I gasped, unable to ignore the question that was imploding my brain. His grin disappeared as he appeared immensely mournful. Of course not, you poor boy, he replied, his once cocksure tone divulging into sedated, doleful woe. Suddenly deflated, the island's patriarch walked up to the entrance of his office and opened it. On the floor lay Gregory, who was fast asleep on the ground, snoring like a sheep as he rested. Dr. Oscar then quietly shut the door closed and walked back to his desk. You understand that if I can convince you of that scenario, I could convince anyone. A crucial and unfortunate fact. To answer a future question of yours, no, Gregory won't be able to back up your story either. He won't because he's not going to leave. He's not leaving because the both of you will stay here and take care of my facilities because it's the right thing for you to do. If you escape, Walter, it would be like you never left, trapped practically alone in a place you don't want to be. If you go home and spout what they will interpret as nonsense, you'll be thrown into a psych ward. At least on this island you'll have Gregory, and you'll have me. Over time you'll come to appreciate me, what I've offered you today. You may not see it now, but it'll come, he boasted. In that moment, he knew he had me. A convincing case that no longer had to be made. I couldn't help but applaud him. All this time, you've had this planned, this cell of scenarios and dead ends you've put me in. It's brilliant. He nodded in thanks before continuing. I can't take all the credit. I've had discussions with one of your old advisors, the one who diagnosed you. It's clear you left on bad terms, as he had no trouble explaining how to interpret you, how to ward off any potential risk you proposed with the use of your records. History can be an awful thing to have. Unfortunately for you, your history is etched in parchment. There's nothing you can do to change it. My head tilted downward as I twiddled my thumbs, holding back any tears or sorrow, unable to give the doctor any more pleasure than he has already received. My mind emptied as he rambled on more and more about his plan. The doctor spun a carefully constructed web regarding my role in his project, how I could help lead his creations onto their next path, how he could teach me everything he knew and transform me into what he has become, as if it was desirable. After a while, he noticed the deflated, empty look on my face and stopped talking, likely analyzing my face for any port of entry. Will you be going to the ceremony? I asked, swigging down another heavy gulp and reverting to small talk like a simpleton, filling the air with any words to sway his glare. So you've heard. Yes, I'll be in attendance. He's my creation, after all. He's basically my son. He reminds me of you in some regard. Emotional and prone to outburst, but an intelligent creature who's bursting with potential. You share a kindred spirit. My only solace in his death is the birth of you into our colony. A fitting replacement for someone I once deemed irreplaceable, he admitted, somber and solemn. A rare stroke of honesty. Why not save him? Call off the ceremony. I'm sure Zeta will listen to you, I suggested. Oh, I wish I could. But a precedent has been put in place, a law Zeta has constructed in which a second offense is punishable by death. And I can't overrule him, because he'd lose power. Those around him would lose the last ounces of respect they have for him. He's too insecure, Walt. I couldn't do that to him. It is true, though, what Zeta claims about Delta. Have he tried to stop you? I asked. The only thing Delta is guilty of is trying to stop himself. He expressed his concern about becoming too similar to me. I suppose his idea that I was a glistening hero faded away as he grew. Like an angst-riddled teen, he wanted nothing to do with me. He wanted to leave the colony and start his own world. He knew what the price for exile was, and he took it with honor. He'll do the same tonight, and it will crush me to see him leave. After a long block of silence in which the both of us stewed in our thoughts, the doctor smacked his desk and gleamed at me. "All right, Walter, enough of this blabber. It's time for the moment of truth. Our chat has ended. I've explained to you why you were chosen and why you should accept. I've done everything in my power to articulate the best solution for you and for Gregory, one might say the only solution. Now that my speech is over, I can finally ask the question. Walter Mai, would you like to become the observer of these lands? My successor, who will watch my beautiful creations grow and evolve until they've reached perfection. Are you prepared to oversee this crucial task?" he proudly asked, his voice rising into a theatrical declaration. "Nope. Not interested. I'd like to go home now," I quickly replied, not even taking a second to deliberate. The old man's wrinkled, smug smile fell from his lips. Oh, he thought he had me, and yet he didn't understand something his little papers failed to reveal. I'm not one who takes well to bullies and their scare tactics. Eccentric, charming bullies are no different in my eyes. They're still assholes. He took a second to gather his thoughts and gulped a deep, bitter smattering of anguish. From out of nowhere, an enthusiastic grin popped up from his face as he beamed at me. "I shouldn't have asked you that question without giving you time to deliberate. So silly of me. I apologize. How about you sleep on it? Consider my offer and give me an answer tomorrow morning," he suggested. You have no idea how fucking tempted I was to yell the words "no" again in his face, just to once again see his conceited, satisfied expression fade off of his weathered, ancient mug. Unfortunately, my escape plan was the only thing bubbling in my head at that moment, and so I did that which was safest. I agreed to his petulant sleepover and shook his hand. Just as I was about to leave, though, he stopped me. "One more glass?" he offered. Well, I was more than tipsy. There was no way I could refuse him. The two of us poured ourselves another vial of the truth serum and smiled at each other as our drinks foamed to the brim. And I could tell the man was hurt, beyond what I had expected. His eyes seemed to sink within themselves while he rose his glass in the air. "To our future. May it be long and prosperous," he exclaimed, his words failing him while they fell from his lips. "Yes, very long, indeed," I graciously stated, and clinked my glass against his, causing vodka to spill all over the floor. All I could do was laugh as I gargled the drink down and slammed my glass onto his desk. "Till next time, Doctor," I exclaimed, and whipped my head away from the broken man's frown. "Walter, before you go, I want you to know something. I want to teach you at least one lesson that has taken me many years to learn," he croaked. "Teach away," I blurted. "I'm aware of your attempts to cloak your warts in an effort to become normal. By doing so, you've lost yourself in the shackles of conformity. I suggest you try a different approach. Accept your flaws for what they are, no matter how horrific they might be. It makes living with yourself much easier, much less painful."